Good morning. Good morning, everybody. I think before I get into today's message, I just feel like it would be a good thing for us to just take a few moments in silence to remember our beloved family member, Kathy, in love, and for us to just take a moment in silence to engulf her and her family and her friends and all of us who loved her in love. So if you would just join me in just a moment of silence and send your love to Kathy right now. And we give thanks for the life that was and is and always will be Kathy King. And in Science of Mind, we do believe in eternity, and we also believe that love never dies. So thank you all for that. Let's switch gears just a bit to talk about today's talk. Now, the theme of this year has been the power of connection. And every month we have a different way to express that connection. So in February, we talked about connecting to family. March was connecting to abundance. April was connecting to the earth. And May, starting today, happy May Day, is connecting to practical prayer. And I'm going to begin it this way. Have you guys ever bought greeting cards, not to send out, but because you liked them so much, you kept them for yourself? I'm not alone in that. Good. This is a greeting card that I bought a while back, and I loved it, and I've kept it. Actually, I bought it probably 25 years ago. How much was it? It was only like $3, so you know that was a long time ago. Anyway, it's this picture here of a man sitting in a doctor's office with a doctor who has his whatever that's called, as he's examining him. And the caption of it is the doctor saying to the patient, "I'm afraid you've had a paradigm shift." And I love that so much. And in a sense, I feel like that's what prayer does. It shifts our paradigm out of the external world and into our internal world, which is where we find the power. And it moves us out of the world of duality and into a place of true oneness. And Science of Mind is all about oneness. And in Science of Mind, many of us know, we call affirmative prayer spiritual mind treatment. And it's called mind treatment because it is meant to use our mind as a tool to get to a higher state of consciousness. Now, in the old days, at least for me, we were taught to pray to something or someone outside of ourselves. It's called a prayer of petition. Please let me have this. I always call it the Santa Claus form of prayer. Please let me be on the nice list so I get the thing that I want. And we hoped and prayed we were worthy. And that's the way that I had learned it. But coming into Science of Mind, I learned a different way of prayer. Not praying out there to something, but it was about praying from someplace, from someplace. In our prayer, our spiritual mind treatment, we have 5 steps that make up a prayer or a treatment. And the very first step is recognition. This is where we focus on the one, or God, the universe, the creator, the one mind, whatever you call it. We focus on that oneness. We focus on it, and in our words, we describe it, and we also feel it. Doing this gets us to that place of praying from a higher place. Now we are praying from the place where we see there is no separation from the Creator and us. It is all one. The Celts, I love Celtic history. The Celts called this going to the thin place, Thin place, which is also what Ernest Holmes called it. Famously at an event at Asilomar, which is a meeting place in California where the Science of Mind people used to have a yearly retreat. He was giving a talk there, and as he was talking, he went into a mystical experience. There's audio of him doing this, by the way, where he says that he began to feel the presence, and he said, "Oh, the veil is so thin." And that veil he was talking about, the veil, the thin place that the Celts were talking about, was that place between us and our humanness and the eternal divine. He also said, as he noted in the book, Love and Law, that when he does treatment, that first step, the step of recognition I talked about, is the place where he can really feel the presence. And he says in the book that he weeps when he gets to that place of knowing the oneness. When I was in prac training, probably about 100 years ago now, my practitioner teacher once told us prac students that someday on our spiritual walk, we would get to the place that if we just concentrated on that first step of treatment, we wouldn't actually need the other 4 steps, because it encompasses all of the steps, because it is oneness. And she was right. That doesn't mean the other 4 steps aren't valuable. They absolutely are. Each one of them actually is incredible. But sometimes that first step just takes you into the presence with a capital P, where no other words are needed. So in addition to our Science of Mind, spiritual mind treatment, I wanted to quickly go over 3 ways really truly to get to that oneness, all inspired by Science of Mind teachings, and also inspired by Julia Cameron's latest book, Seeking Wisdom. Julia Cameron, of course, is the author of The Artist's Way. And she was very influenced, I don't know if you know this, by Ernest Holmes. Listen to what she says in this new book of hers, Seeking Wisdom. She said, "The great spiritual teacher, Ernest Holmes, founder of the movement Science of Mind, believed in and practiced affirmative prayer. His prayers were positive, uplifting, and instructive. He believed in God's goodness and our own. His prayers connect adversity to opportunity. They connect loss to gain, and they connect sorrow to wisdom. They are powerful and expansive. He proclaimed, 'My will is thy will.' Clear-eyed and clear-headed, they assume the best from God and from ourselves. In 1934, Holmes published a tiny but powerful volume called Creative Ideas. When it was republished in 2004, it was my honor and privilege to write the foreword, introducing Holmes' idea to a new and broader audience. My book, The Artist's Way, is grounded in Ernest Holmes' principles. He believed, as I do, that prayer was claiming our birthright." So she talks about affirmative prayer, like we talk about affirmative prayer. And she breaks down in the book, Seeking Wisdom, she breaks down prayer into several methods that can help us. And one of the methods, the first one I'll talk about, is what she calls prayers of gratitude. This is literally spending time being grateful for everything in your life. We all know about gratitude lists or spending time in gratitude, but this is prayers of gratitude. And by everything in your life, I mean everything. Yes, the car, the job, the friends, the health, the pets, and so on and so on. But also, when we get high enough, we can also be grateful for our trials. Our ego says we can, and that it's foolish to do so, but our ego wants to stay a victim. Have you noticed that when you get to the soul level, or that level of oneness, that the soul is never a victim. And so from the soul's perspective in us, we can be grateful to our challenges, even sometimes without knowing what blessing they bring yet. Of course, we are in charge of our own perception about all of this. But if you've ever done any shadow work, or if you've done therapy, or if you've been in one of the AA programs, you know that out of some of the worst times, we have discovered hidden blessings. I'm not saying we're necessarily thankful for the painful experience itself, but we can choose to find things that we are grateful that came about because of that painful experience. Using myself as an example, I could choose to be, out of my hard times, the things that were difficult in my life, I could choose to be grateful to my resilience, grateful that I became someone who learned to be sensitive to others, grateful that I discovered how strong I am, grateful that I learned to not let others' opinions of me matter more than my opinion of myself. That was a hard one. Grateful that by being broken, I broke open to deeper love. Grateful to learn to stand up for myself when I needed to, and more. These things in turn helped me in other ways. The Bible calls it wrestling with the angel, which is wrestling with it until you get the blessing. We don't see any blessing in the victim mode, but when we move to that place of gratitude, which brings us to oneness, we can see blessings everywhere. We don't get stuck in just saying, oh, thank you for the sun. We can thank the rain as well. So if there's someone who's bugging you right now, thank them for showing you an area you need to work on. Second, she also talks about what she calls the prayers of awe, AWE. That is so closely aligned with our first step of treatment, recognition. In this prayer, Julia writes, we become focused on just how big and majestic this world is and how life is. When we do that, oh, I'm getting goosebumps right now. It's truly awesome. A couple of months ago, I rented a house on the beach. And as I stood at the edge of the beach, right at the water, looking out at that vast ocean, my arms open, I just had that deep realization of how vast the ocean was and how huge this world is. And I felt tiny in a good way. Like I was a small part of something so much bigger than myself. It's so easy to make everything about ourselves, isn't it? To have our world revolve around our feelings and our emotions and our experiences and our dramas. But it's good sometimes to step out of ourselves and realize we are each part of something massive, infinite. We're here with a purpose, and so is everyone and everything, whether we can see it or not. But when we ruminate on it, when we allow ourselves to sense it, we get to that mystical oneness and awe. You can do that anywhere, by the way. You don't have to go to the ocean or stand at the Grand Canyon or go to the mountains. You can do it right where you are. Just meditating, closing your eyes and contemplating the vastness of life itself. You begin to feel that awe. Or do like I did this morning and take a walk, and the sun was shining. It was beautiful, the fresh air. And I just got into that mystical place of oneness. So gratitude for life and awe at the vastness of life. Those are two paths that put us into that first step of treatment, that oneness. And the third in this book, Julia talks about a practice that she uses, which is similar to something I learned many years ago and have used in different ways. I learned it and taught it as something called soul letters. But Julia's practice is called guidance, and it's less formal than what I've done, and I love it. She talks about connecting to that higher wisdom by contacting it, pen and paper in hand, through writing. She calls it praying on the page, and it's very conversational. Listen to this. She says, uh, when I got sober and brought a new kind of prayer into my life, I craved some record of this prayer called guidance I was receiving. I began to pray on the page. Please guide me about whatever I would pray, listening then for a response, and then writing out what I had heard. Prayer began to be a dialogue, not a monologue. It was a conversation with me talking to God and God talking back. As I experimented with this practice, I found that what I heard back would prove to be gentle, accurate, and useful. This is one of the main ways I talk to God to this day. What should I do about such and such, I ask, and I listen for a response. Pen in hand, pen to the page. I hear a reply. I jot down what I hear. Very often the answers are simple, simpler than I would have thought. And then she gives us an example for her life. She says, for example, I asked for guidance about my ex-husband. 40 years after our divorce, I felt I still loved him, and that bothered me. Shouldn't I be over him by now? So I wrote, what about still loving my ex-husband? What should I do? I heard back simple advice that untangled my heart. Just love him. I asked further, but shouldn't I be over him? I'm ashamed that I still love him. And the guidance came back saying, love is eternal. Drop the rock. You love who you love. No need for shame. No need to get over love. My relief at receiving this guidance was palpable. What to me had been a complicated issue was revealed to be simple. I was directed to follow my heart, and when I did, my complications dropped away. And then later she says this, I still use this practice of praying on the page, guidance, daily. I will refer to myself in my guidance as LJ, which stands for Little Julie. And then I pose a question. I will listen back for the answer and then write the response. For example, Little Julie, what do people need to know about talking to God? The answer, that everyone has a direct line to the great creator. I have learned to listen to my guidance almost constantly. And over many years of taking this guidance, I have come to trust it completely. I may not always believe it in the moment. My human mind will say, but, or what if? But it has always proven itself to be steady and useful. What we hear back will often be surprisingly simple and straightforward. Allow yourself to experiment with this tool whenever you have a question. A sense of support and companionship is likely to be the result. I'm sometimes asked, but Julia, what if it's just your imagination that prayers are answered? And I reply, if it's just my imagination, it's still good. And my imagination is far wiser than I thought. Praying on the page for what shall I do next, I heard, you will be writing radiant songs. I was dubious at best. I had been raised as the non-musical one in my hugely musical family. She had never written anything to that point musical. And at that time, she said, I was 45 years old. If I was the least bit musical, I would know about it. But the guidance persisted and said to Julia, you will be writing radiant songs. 2 weeks later, seated on a rock by a rocky mountain stream, I heard my first song come through me. It was indeed radiant. As I became accustomed to praying on the page, I became accustomed to guidance giving me a peek ahead. I perhaps didn't know what lay ahead, but guidance did. I was told once, much goodness lies ahead for you. And tutored by prayer, I came to believe it. This is the book, Seeking Wisdom, for those of you who are curious. So that's briefly 3 forms of prayer that we can use for our goodness. Praying with gratitude for everything. praying with a sense of awe at the vastness of life, and praying on the page to receive guidance from our higher self. 3 ways to move to the place that Ernest Holmes described as where the veil is thin. And we can not only intellectually think about our oneness, but we can experience oneness. And that changes everything for good. So in closing, I'm going to read a prayer that is actually a poem, and it's from another card that I bought myself probably 20-something years ago, and I loved it. It was written by the poet James Broughton. Look at this beautiful card. And this is how it goes. This is the poem that is, I think, a prayer. He called it, "This is it." And of course, the it is the one. This is it, and I am it, and you are it. And so is that. And he is it, and she is it, and it is it, and that is that. Oh, it is this, and it is thus, and it is them, and it is us, and it is now, and here it is, and here we are. So this is it, and so it is. Amen.